Macron and French centrists don't have answers as yellow vest protests head for the 10th week. We're going to skim this a little bit. France started a new Saturday tradition, Gilets jaunes. Protesters wearing yellow safety vests started to take the streets by tens of thousands in the morning. This happened in last November. By the afternoon, the protesters would clash with riot police. This past Saturday, some 8,000 protesters showed up for Act 9, or the 9th week of protests, marching from Bercy in East Paris to the Arc de Triomphe in the west of the city. At least 85,000 rallied across the streets. The strength and endurance of the movement, which has no set structure, no clear leadership, and no political or institutional affiliation, has taken everyone by surprise, not least Macron. Macron rose to power by bypassing established political parties. The battle over the Gilets jaunes and the weakened French center has major consequences for populist parties on the left and the right throughout Europe. So let's scroll down a little bit. This is a really long article. The Gilets jaunes protests are unique in the intensity of the violence, both from the protesters and the police. At least 10 people have died during protests, mostly from being hit by cars and trucks while blocking the road. The security forces have responded to the protests with heavy force. At least a dozen people have lost an eye after being hit by flash grenades or tear gas canisters. More than 80 people have been seriously injured, according to the website checknews.fr. An 80-year-old woman in Marseille died after being hit in the face with a tear gas canister. This past Saturday, this is the author of the article, I saw police in Paris aim at protesters instead of into the air or at the ground. I myself was hit by a tear gas canister in the thigh. The police brutality has led to more of the French public coming to terms with what people of color, of the white French public coming to terms with what people of color experience on a regular basis. The fear of being targeted by police brutality has also contributed to some black activists or other activists of color expressing reticence to participate. The protests have had a massive impact on the economy as well. The country has lost millions of euros in damaged vehicles, storefronts, and more, while police officers' overtime pay has skyrocketed and international flights to Paris decreased by 5 to 10% in December. The disruption caused by protesters forced 58,000 workers to be laid off, temporarily suspended, or have their hours reduced. Macron's response to the crisis has been to repeal the diesel tax and to promise a host of other reforms, including raising the minimum wage by 100 euros a month. But critics have voiced skepticism about the plans to implement the promised changes, and Macron has tried to take control of the narrative by calling for a month-long national debate on key governance issues starting this week. The debate will feature a town hall-style forums throughout the country. There is no guarantee of any policy implementation. In the meantime, protesters are readying themselves for next Saturday. So it's intense over there. And there hasn't been many solid answers. You know, they're protesting for a lot of reasons, and we know this. It's not just for the repeal of the gas tax. It's also for living wages. It's also for tax breaks given to the elite. It's also for breaks to the oil and gas industry. In an overall response to neoliberal policies. That's what these protests are really about. And it kind of covers all sides of the spectrum. And really, at the end of the day, what is it really? It's a conflict between the haves and the have-nots. It's also about climate change. So what Macron needs to do is he needs to, first of all, roll back these breaks for the elite. He needs to roll that back, get rid of that. Up the living wages like he said he's going to. That's a good thing. Repeal that tax like he said he's going to. And then come up with a real Green New Deal and come up with a transportation solution. You don't just tax without any representation. You invest in transportation. You invest in more sustainable transportation solutions. And, you know, being a resident of the United States, I certainly can't point my finger at France. I mean, keep in mind, this is going on in France, a country that has the best healthcare in the world, arguably. At least according to the World Health Organization, they have the best. And I believe that to be true. But even still, there's so many problems because neoliberalism has reared its ugly head all around the world. Not just in the United States, it's everywhere. It's all around the world. It's not limited to the U.S. And it's infecting the UK, and it's infecting France, and it's infecting Canada. So the yellow vests are out there for the 10th week. And there have been some brutal results. And I guess my question to kind of end the show today, I'm going to go to you guys. What do you think's going to happen when the yellow vests protests come here? We are here to the United States. And I know some of you aren't in the United States, so feel free to speak to your experience about what's going on where you're at. What's the climate like where you're at right now? Because right now, the yellow vests are coming to the United States, and I think that protests are a good thing. I, of course, don't want to see anyone get hurt. But protests, they're not just a good thing. They're an essential thing. They're a necessary thing. They need to happen. And, we're going to be protesting similar to the Extinction Rebellion. There is an Extinction Rebellion chapter coming here. They launch on January 26th. So we're going to be protesting for action on climate change, for living wages, for a Green New Deal, for healthcare. We're going to be protesting for all that as well. And at the end of the day, how can you sum up the protest? It's a conflict between the haves and the have-nots. Read Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals. But what do you guys predict is going to happen? If I'm being totally honest here, I do predict that there's going to be a lot of brutality from law enforcement. And that's concerning. Because, they were brutal during Occupy, and I think this is going to be a much more amplified version of Occupy. So I think you're going to see more pepper spray. I think you're going to see more tear gas. I think you're going to see more. They pummeled people with freezing cold water in the middle of winter in the Dakotas when DAPL was going on. And I think you're going to see more security contracted out to the point where we don't even know who these people are. They're not even actual police officers. So I guess it's just something to be aware of and to be careful out there. But let me see what you guys are saying. Do you guys think, the other question is do you think it will lead to any type of policy change? My answer to that is I certainly hope so, because we don't have any other choice at this point. Poll after poll, after study, can tell you that public opinion doesn't really play a factor in our politics. It really doesn't matter much. It matters very, very little, if at all. So when that's the case, you have to protest. You have to have acts of interference, which involves protesting. It involves local action. It involves forming alliances on the grassroots level. And we got to do all the above. We can't just do one or the other. We have to do all of the above. We have to protest. We have to form alliances. We have to have a ground game locally. We have to help out locally and do things in our backyard. All that has to happen. All of it. And you know what's possible without a free and open internet? None of it. That's why I'm fighting for municipal broadband. Because I feel like that's something where my skills are best set for. And I think without a free and open internet, everything I just described will be way harder, if not impossible. Because it's the communication vehicle we've come to rely on.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your